Hello, my name is Olorotimi Osha. Today is July the 21st, 2026, and today I want to discuss the US government's announcement that it's accelerating denaturalizations, right? So, denaturalization, that's the process of revoking the citizenship of a naturalized American citizen. I've done videos concerning this, and I realized that because of the escalation by the Trump administration of these denaturalizations, there's been a lot of angst, right, amongst uh, naturalized citizens. I've done a video explaining that citizenship is permanent, right, naturalized or natural born, and you know. Uh, One's citizenship cannot be revoked without the voluntary consent of the citizen, naturalized uh, or otherwise. In this respect, naturalized because I did an earlier video describing the case of Afroyim versus Rusk, 1967, right? Um, and I've also tried to explain that the naturalization process, right, affects what the naturalized citizen did prior to them becoming a citizen, and they didn't disclose this, right, to the U.S. government, right, to the officer, right, because it's an officer representing the U.S. government, right, and it is material. So if they had disclosed this to the U.S. government, the U.S. government would not have given them citizenship, right? So it's not what an individual does after they become a citizen, right? But it's what they did before they became a U.S. citizen, right? And they didn't disclose it, and it was material. Um, so that's material misrepresentation, concealing material information, or fraud, right? In the case of fraud, if they intentionally committed immigration fraud. I've done videos explaining this before, but today I'm going to give a specific example of the denaturalization of a pedophile, right, who didn't disclose that he had committed a crime prior to his um, being naturalized as a citizen. Um, it's interesting. I saw the case of a woman who's married to an American citizen. She's originally from Lithuania. I was just watching that in the news today. Irita Gold is her name, and she's in detention, right? And she was speaking from detention. She's married to an American citizen, a U.S. Army veteran, and she has two children with him. But apparently, her situation is that she was already in removal proceedings, right? She was in removal proceedings. Um, 7 years ago. So when they put you in removal proceedings, that means the U.S. government has, ordered your deportation, your removal from the United States. Sometimes people evade that removal, that deportation, but the U.S. government can come and get you at any time, so long as you've been in removal proceedings. Now, if you've been in removal proceedings, that also bars you from becoming a U.S. citizen. If you don't disclose it or whatever, the U.S. government can always forgive stuff, right? It's up to them. I know of a situation. I heard of a situation of a woman. In fact, I know of her, a woman who her whole family was here, and she was a good woman, but she was in removal proceedings. But again, it's a court process. They just don't pick you up and deport you. No, you have to go to court. You have a right to defend yourself in court, right? You have a right to counter and say, explain why, defend yourself, say why you shouldn't be deported. Remember, again, it's the U.S. government that also has the burden of proof. Now, in this person's case, the judge decided, uh, you know, to uh, to invalidate the removal order. The judge, was lenient, invalidated the removal order, and granted the person a green card because her whole family was here. She was the only person who just happened not to be a citizen, and her whole family was, her children were citizens, and she was a decent woman. She was a good woman, and she was honest with the government. So sometimes it's up to the judge, right? The judge can be lenient sometimes. So those are rare instances. Um, I think for the most part, the U.S. government, with respect to immigration, the U.S. government is actually very fair. I think for the most part, the U.S. government is really fair. But you have to understand U.S. immigration laws. So the U.S. immigration laws, they don't want criminals, right? That's just part of it. If they know someone is a criminal, then they don't want to naturalize them. So those are the people that are being denaturalized. They hid their past criminal convictions in the naturalization process, and then they got the citizenship, and somehow it came up. Now, importantly, something that I also want to just explain before I discuss this denaturalization of the pedophile priest, right? Um, it's the U.S. government that gives you that citizenship, that says you're fine. Now, guess something about understand something about the U.S. government. I can say this for a certain because one, I've worked for the U.S. government. I'm in a limbo state. Done videos talking about what I'm going through, how I was wrongfully charged by Montgomery County Police, who assaulted me based on fabricated stuff. So I should be going back to work in the United States federal government by the grace of God. So I've worked in the U.S. Federal Civil Service, the U.S. federal government. So I understand how it operates, right? The United States federal government, right? The civil servants or whatever, those who represent the government, they do not want to admit that they made a mistake. It's something you will not catch them doing, that they made a mistake, right? So they gave someone citizenship. They're saying, yes, they did the right thing, right? They didn't make a mistake. Because guess what? The bureaucrats who signed off, it goes through a long process, right? Their jobs, their reputation is on the line. But again, just as a matter of practicality, practical matter, United States government, you wouldn't catch them admitting that they made a mistake or that they did something wrong, right? Giving somebody who shouldn't have gotten the citizenship a citizenship, right? So, but in this case, I'll give you an example of, so those people who are there denaturalizing, it's a case of clear and convincing evidence, right? Remember again, it's a costly process. It's the federal government, the government who gave citizenship. They're the ones who, although this time it goes through the Department of Justice, right? They're the ones who have to prove through clear, unequivocal, and convincing evidence that the naturalized person obtained their citizenship by fraud, right? They're the ones, they have the burden of proof, or that they concealed a material fact. Had the government known this material fact, it would never have given them this U.S. citizenship, right? Because once you become a citizen, right, you are now entitled, right? So, and you're also protected by privileges and immunities, right? So if the government got it wrong, you can always sue them for violating your civil and constitutional rights. So the government doesn't typically go after people it has naturalized, people it has given citizenship to. Again, historically, they've only opened 11 cases per year on average, just 11 cases, and they've not necessarily been successful. So today I'm going to give you an instance of a case. They've just opened it, but an example of the sort of person who's denaturalized, which the government will convincingly go after. They know they can win, prove their case in a court of law, because they have to do it through a court of law, through clear and unequivocal and convincing evidence. So that's the case of Father Urbano Vazquez-Ortega, right? So he was a priest. He was a priest in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. in Maryland, and apparently he in 2015, in 2015, sometime May 2015, he abused a 13-year-old girl, right? He had sexually molested a 13-year-old girl. The mother reported it to his superior, a Reverend Moses Villalta. And however, this wasn't reported to the police, right? But it was reported to his superior. It was documented. Then Reverend Moses Villalta would eventually report this to another priest, a visiting priest, in October of 2018. The visiting priest immediately reported it to the police, and then less than a week after, the police investigated, and the police arrested Father Urbano Vazquez-Ortega. He was subsequently defrocked in 2018, meaning he was removed as a priest. So he was removed as a priest, and however, prior to that, to his arrest and his removal as a priest, he had become naturalized as a U.S. citizen in 2017. The U.S. government naturalized him. He became a U.S. citizen in 2017, right? But the offense he committed happened in 2015, and it was already documented with the Archdiocese, even though he wasn't prosecuted, he wasn't tried or anything. Now, later on, even though he had been arrested and removed as a priest, he would continue, after he became a U.S. citizen, he would continue to abuse children, including a 9-year-old. Eventually, he was arrested again and then indicted, and he was taken to trial. He was tried in around May 2019 or so. He was tried May 2019, and he was convicted. He was convicted of child abuse, abusing children, and he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. So you can see the mindset of the government about not wanting to naturalize criminals, right? Because criminals, would tend to repeat, they did the crime, yes, in the past, they didn't report it, the government missed it, and then they become citizens, and then they commit the crimes again, right? So even after he was removed as a priest, even after he had become a naturalized citizen, and he hadn't been convicted or prosecuted, he would go on to abuse children again, as young as 9 years old. And eventually he was convicted of the crimes he committed, including the one he did in 2015, prior to his getting his citizenship. He never revealed this to the government. Now, do you think if he had told the government that, okay, you know what, he abused this child in 2015 and he was accused of it, it was reported to his boss, would they have given him the citizenship? No. So he was convicted and sentenced in November 2019 to 15 years in prison. So that's an instance where the government has clear, unequivocal, and convincing, evidence for denaturalization. So he had committed a heinous crime. That's a sort of crime. Sexual abuse of a minor. That's a sort of crime, the United States government doesn't want. Especially, he kept doing it over and over again, even after they removed him as a priest, right? So the reason why he was eventually prosecuted was because there were new allegations against him, so fresh allegations, and he was convicted. Now, the thing also about sexual abuse, like felony sexual abuse of a minor, there's no statute of limitations, and no for criminal prosecution, right? In at least 44 states in the U.S. and especially in the federal government, there's no statute of limitations, right? So even if they didn't know, they didn't catch it before the person became a naturalized citizen. Um, if they eventually have enough evidence, they can prosecute it later on and come after the person. There's no statute of limitations for sexual abuse of a minor for the federal government. So that's an instance where denaturalization occurs, right? So it was something he did. He did that prior to his becoming a U.S. citizen, and so the government is able to prosecute successfully and provide clear and convincing evidence for revocation of the citizenship. In any event, I hope this was helpful. I'll do more videos to just provide explanations and examples of what the sort of cases that the U.S. government seeks denaturalization for. Because under the law, you're a citizen, it's permanent. They should have gone through the process properly. But some people, like Father Ortega, no longer Father Ortega, but Vazquez-Ortega, especially because of the position he held as a priest, right? It's easy for him to pull wool over the government's eyes. My name is Olorotimi Osha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.